it's already this bad this early, how bad is it really going to be this afternoon?
You see the Phil Campbell area, we had reports of tornado going across Phil Campbell. You saw as it came into Phil Campbell, it still had that debris ball.
We're just talking about the fact that this is really an extraordinary event. I mean, this may end up being one of the worst tornado outbreaks on record.
These were not your ordinary tornadoes.
You're approaching a twisting storm. Please exercise caution.
Hi guys, my name is Carly. Welcome back to my channel. This is Blaze, and get ready because today we're talking about Hackleburg. I hope you like the new setup. I've been working really hard on it, and thank you so much to the people who've been leaving me comments about ways to improve my audio and video quality. So hopefully we're only going to get better from here. I was requested by several of you actually to talk about the Phil Campbell Hackleburg tornado from the 2011 super outbreak, and so that is exactly what we're going to do today. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. The April 27th, 2011 super outbreak is cemented as one of the deadliest and most violent outbreaks in recorded US history. Even if you aren't a weather fan, you probably personally know someone who was impacted by this event, remember where you were when it happened, or maybe even you or your family were impacted by it personally. There are so many reasons why this tornado outbreak is among the most notable in US history, including setting records for having some of the most tornadoes in a 24-hour period, the most deadly and violent tornadoes, only being rivaled by that of the 1974 super outbreak, which some of you might also remember. For the entire outbreak between April 25th and April 28th, 2011, a staggering 360 tornadoes would touch down, 15 of those being violent EF4 to EF5 range, would take the lives of 324 people and cause a total of $10.2 billion, and that is in 2011 currency. These events are extremely anomalous, so thankfully we don't have to deal with them, usually more than one in a lifetime. Out of the hundreds of tornadoes from this outbreak, there is one that stands out among the others, and that is the Phil Campbell Hackleburg tornado. Generally, this is kind of the part where I will talk about the communities before the tornado, their context, sort of what they're known for. But we honestly have a lot of other things to cover today. For the sake of brevity, I figured we could just skip right into the meteorological part because there's a lot of that to talk about. The meteorology setup for the 2011 super outbreak is one of the most notable and honestly incredible of modern history. It is typically one of the first outbreaks that people will learn about when they start really getting into weather and historical weather events. The environmental conditions for the 2011 outbreak were beyond extraordinary. They were perfect for a violent tornado setup. So to preface the discussion, I think that we should talk a little bit about tornado outbreaks in the Deep South. Being so close to the Gulf of Mexico, Dixie Alley or the Deep South states are considered a hotspot for tornadoes because of the ample access to heat and moisture that the Gulf of Mexico provides. Because of this, tornadoes in the Dixie Alley region are what's referred to as HP storms, high precipitation storms. This means that the tornadoes that do form, generally not always, are rain wrapped and a lot more difficult to see. And we can compare this to something like the Midwest tornadoes that are generally a little bit more LP or lower precipitation. So in the Midwest, you get these really clean, clear looking, not rain wrapped, very photogenic tornadoes, whereas in the deep south we get these really big, nasty, rain wrapped tornadoes that you can't see. On top of the deep south being another hotspot for tornadoes, it is also actually a really deadly area for tornadoes to occur. And for those reasons, Alabama is actually consistently ranked as one of the deadliest states for tornadoes. So keep in mind as we discuss this event that these type of tornado outbreaks in the deep south are especially dangerous because of the lowered visibility, the high precipitation that surrounds them. And when people can't see the tornadoes, they are of course going to be less inclined to shelter or, take any sort of action. Now let's take a look at the 2011 setup. Now, April 24th, 2011, we start out 3 days before the outbreak with a strong system of low pressure moving into the Arklatex region. Out ahead of the cold front, we have a rising warm sector going into Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. And of course, that warm sector provides our ample instability, our cape, for the storms to literally feed off of as they get started. So now to add to this concerning storm system already, there's also a wicked amount of wind shear that's starting to feed into the atmosphere. So by April 25th, forecasters are already starting to see the growing concern as this event moves from the Arklatex region and is set to move into the deep south a few days later.
Before the event, I started forecasting on Saturday, so 4 days before the event. It didn't seem realistic that our forecast 4 days out was going to be this bad and actually verify.
And seeing how concerning this setup is starting to look, the SPC, or the Storm Prediction Center, already starts issuing higher risked regions for severe weather a few days out. And if you don't already know, that's kind of rare for the Storm Prediction Center to do because they're generally really conservative unless they have a high confidence for something to play out. And to get a better understanding of some of these dynamics rather than listening to me, there's nobody better to explain it than James Spann himself.
I'm James Spann. This is the afternoon edition of the Weather Extreme video for Monday, the 25th day of April. Severe weather not that far away. It looks like a major threat for much of the southern U.S. in coming days, especially Wednesday. And on day 3, we think this could be our big day. Moderate risk already. It's very rare to see moderate risks up on day 3. And it's a classic loaded gun sounding. I mean, it doesn't get much more classic than that. Potential for supercells, 77.5%. Everything seems to be on the board. And look at the hodograph. I mean, everything seems to be in place for what could be a major severe weather outbreak Wednesday afternoon into Wednesday night.
It's becoming more apparent that as the days progress into the main event, all threats are going to be on the table, including damaging winds, hail, and definitely tornadoes.
This is for Tuesday, the 26th of April. A major severe weather event potentially across Alabama for the next 36 hours. Very intense trough digging west of the state. Energy coming through the base of the trough. A surface low is under 1,000 millibars. This run is deeper, which is problematic. Just west of Memphis. Very favorable position for severe weather. We'll have cellular storms that form, and those could go severe with the potential of violent long-track tornadoes. There's a projected sounding. This is for Tuscaloosa tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, and it's the loaded gun type sounding. Surface-based cape mid-afternoon, and the numbers are way up there, almost like a summer day. And if you go to the west, how about a cape of 4,000 to 5,000 joule? Goodness gracious. That's a powder keg. And there's a look at the significant tornado parameter. The peak value is a 7. That is extremely high. Anything over a 2 is very significant. So we got that thing near 7. The supercell composite, same thing. Numbers are off the chart. Clearly, synoptically speaking, everything is in place for a red letter severe weather day. Potential for violent long-track tornadoes.
So as you can see, all of the general parameters are maxed out. They are looking absolutely egregious, and you can see that even James Spann, a seasoned meteorologist, is pretty concerned.
They can't possibly have an understanding of the amount of preparation that goes into it, how difficult it is to anticipate and forecast all the things that have to come together for an event like this, how infrequently something like this happens.
So we had this idea that we're going to have some bad storms on Wednesday, but I don't think we had a full appreciation on really how well the models were handling that forecast out 4 days.
It was quite eye-opening to see something like that consistently being shown by the models, and then for it to actually play out.
The National Weather Service is already starting to brief emergency management, have meetings with them, letting them know that you really need to get set up because this could be a prolific day.
To prepare, the National Weather Service office in Huntsville started briefing emergency managers, first responders, and local media more than 48 hours in advance that this would be a major outbreak.
The Birmingham Metro, Tuscaloosa, all of the major cities are starting to get their emergency personnel ready, make sure that they are staffed, and prepare for a disaster the best way that they can. So all that's left for you to know is that all of the parameters are coming together. All of the indices are maxed out for the tornado threat, the violent tornado threat. And on the morning of the event, April 27th, early in the morning, the Storm Prediction Center issues a high risk, the highest level that you can issue, with a 45% hatched risk of tornadoes. That is incredibly high. That's incredibly high. And the wording from the SPC in the watches and convective outlooks issued, they're just straight up saying that there's going to be a major tornado outbreak on the day.
Real sinking feeling came that early in the morning on April the 27th when we were placed in a high risk of severe weather by the Storm Prediction Center.
Meteorologists became increasingly concerned about this being the big one. Sadly, even their dire predictions were well below reality.
Even though everyone knows that this is going to be a red letter day, what happens next is going to take everyone by surprise. For the event of April 27th, there were 3 expected rounds of storms. The first round was supposed to be a QLCS, a quasi-linear convective system that pushed through as a line of storms through the north and central part of Alabama. The second round was expected to be the same, and the third round of severe weather was supposed to be the supercells, the main event in the afternoon where the tornadoes would occur. What they didn't expect, however, was for these 2 rounds of early morning QLCS, the line of storms that moved through, to have embedded supercells that would cause damaging tornadoes.
The first wave came in, I believe it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. We had already seen that the previous storms that were in Mississippi actually were supercells.
Nobody expected this first round of storms to be so powerful, have embedded supercells, and start causing damaging tornadoes, some of them being EF2 and EF3 tornadoes at 4 a.m. This was much stronger than they anticipated, which is also a sign that the event would overperform.
4 o'clock on Wednesday morning, I looked at the radar on my phone to see storms approaching from the south and the west, and knew that it was potentially even worse than I could have imagined. If tornadoes were on the ground at 4 a.m., what would the rest of the day hold?
So by the time this initial line of storms rolled through, over 1 million people in Alabama and Tennessee would be without power. Although the utility workers did the best they could, working tirelessly through the entire morning in Alabama, still about 700,000 people would be out of power by the time the second round of storms, another QLCS, moves through.
As the first wave rolled through and the next wave began to move in from Mississippi during the mid-morning, it was obvious there would be no breaks for the area that day. Some locations were hit multiple times, the same houses damaged in the morning and wiped clean in the afternoon. I talked to one man who was called to his home in East Limestone after the morning storms and was busy tarping his house when the sirens blew again. A few minutes later, he and his wife rode out the tornado in their shower, landing on top of a neighbor's pile of rubble.
The first and second QLCS were incredibly damaging, and again, over 700,000 people would be left without power by the time the main event was anticipated to come in during the afternoon hours. This was such a critical point for the outbreak because now they have hundreds of thousands of people who may or may not have had access to a way to see and hear tornado warnings as they were being issued.
I got really worried about the rest of the day of if it's already this bad this early, how bad is it really going to be this afternoon?
By 1:45 p.m., a PDS tornado watch is issued for a large portion of central and northern Alabama, portions of Tennessee as well. Just as forecasted, by the early afternoon hours, discrete supercells would begin forming in western Mississippi and start making their way into central and northern Alabama. Pretty soon, the tornado outbreak is fully underway and Alabama is already being ravaged with back-to-back tornadoes.
And Jasper and Cordova, these places were absolutely raked by severe weather this morning. There is power out across a large part of Fayette and Walker counties. The warning for Fayette County includes a little sliver here, but the bottom line is
the following most intense group of supercells began to organize across Mississippi and western Alabama. We all had a sinking feeling. By early to mid-afternoon, conditions were optimal for long-track killer tornadoes. Every storm on the radar was showing signs of rotation, but soon the situation would get even more dire.
Meteorologists are horrified to realize that this event was not only grossly overproducing already, but it was about to get much, much worse. A worst case scenario was unfolding for Alabama. Just before 3 o'clock p.m., still fairly early for the outbreak, a rogue supercell forms in western Alabama. With untapped potential in this explosive atmosphere, the storm would have nothing at all to hinder it, as it very quickly would begin to rotate and very soon after drop a tornado. At this point, it's causing roughly EF1 to EF2 damage, but this wouldn't last for long as the tornado very quickly begins to intensify.
A dangerous storm that is approaching downtown Hamilton. We have a sky watcher, in fact, multiple sky watchers in Hamilton. One of them reported a wall cloud just west of her location.
Based on the signatures that we've seen, we have seen substantial damage with the tornado that happened in Coleman a little while ago, and that looks very similar to it. In fact, firefighters in Coleman are now reporting homes completely demolished.
The tornado is now on its way to cross Highway 43, just southwest of Hackleburg. And in just a few short minutes, the tornado has now intensified to about 170 mile-per-hour winds or EF4 intensity.
Toward Hackleburg up Highway 43, give them a call. Make sure they know that there is a tornado that may be on the ground. Then the other tornado is near Hackleburg. If you're in Hackleburg, you need to be in a safe place now. Same thing up around Phil Campbell. And if power is out in Phil Campbell and you know that folks are there, and we keep repeating ourselves with this, but it's a very serious situation because we had so much damage earlier. So many folks are without power and without an ability to get a warning because our weather radio tower up in northwest Alabama has been compromised. There may be some folks who just don't know who normally would, so call them anyway. In this case, it's a cliche, but better to be safe than sorry. Let them know that something's coming their way. Jane?
Now the storm is a massive 3/4 of a mile wide already, and just before it enters Hackleburg, there's an estimated wind speed of 210 miles per hour.
reports of a large tornado on the ground near Hackleburg. Spotters reporting large tornado on the ground. This tornado is moving northeast at 55 miles per hour.
And you can see a very distinct CC drop and debris ball on the media coverage as it's moving through Hackleburg.
I remember watching the storm as it approached this little town of Hackleburg. I saw it produce a strong hook and a debris ball. And I remember thinking, whatever was in Hackleburg is no longer in Hackleburg.
We have live team coverage of today's severe weather threat. Jim Cantore live in Winfield, Alabama.
Jim. Up toward Hamilton in a little town called Hackleburg. Those areas got hit pretty hard.
The tornado has just moved through Hackleburg and spared nothing.
The sad thing about it, we knew it was heading toward a populated area. It gives you kind of an unsettled feeling inside to see that happening. It's one thing to see a big tornado out there in the middle of the Great Plains, but if it's going through a populated area, it's another thing.
It would completely obliterate a massive portion of the town, homes, businesses, people's farms, their livelihood. A Wrangler factory was completely decimated, which, you can imagine is the source for a lot of jobs in that community. Most of the structures in downtown were completely obliterated. The Hackleburg High School, well-built homes were completely swept away, but it wouldn't stop there. The tornado is now continuing on a northeast trajectory into Franklin County, where Phil Campbell is directly in its path.
Extremely dangerous. A large tornado could be down right now about 8 to 10 miles west.
I can't stress this enough, so I'll keep saying it. The atmospheric conditions on this day were so volatile that the tornado wasn't going to just hit one town. These kinds of tornadoes had untapped potential. So there was absolutely no reason for this tornado to weaken in any capacity. In fact, the cell would only continue to grow stronger as it's feeding off of the atmosphere.
West of Hamilton, these are moving northeast, so this new circulation coming in from Mississippi will be staying north of Hamilton. If you live north of Hamilton, be in a safe place.
Phil Campbell doesn't have that much time to prepare, and meteorologists are warning the people of Phil Campbell very urgently to make sure they're getting in their shelters.
That storm has a history of producing damage near Nettleton, Mississippi.
There's a debris ball.
Yep,
right
it's on
there.
the ground. It's got to be.
This is a large, violent tornado that is on the ground. Debris ball, or the large tornado, is crossing the interstate right now. The significant tornado impact is 11.5. The tornado impact is almost maxed out at 9.7, racing northeast at 63 miles per hour.
Phil Campbell had to prepare very quickly as they were facing a direct hit from a now massive, almost mile-wide, violent tornado.
Get in there, y'all, get in there. I don't know where this thing's going.
Let's get my daddy's house all day. After this thing's gone, we're going to see what's going to do.
Look at it. Oh my God.
Oh, shit. It's like, I feel like...
Look at it, look at it.
I feel like I'm on dang storm chasing.
I bet that thing's freaking...
2 miles wide.
Yeah.
Possible tornado along Highway 43, southeast of Phil Campbell.
That is huge. That is huge. Here goes the garbage.
Okay. It looks like stain.
Yeah.
Behind the dark stuff.
That's huge. That's a big tornado.
Yeah, it is. It is huge. All right.
Look at this.
Hamilton area is the storm that's right now close to the Phil Campbell area. So there is a debris ball. It's heading toward Phil Campbell. Definitely a tornado in progress there.
Phil Campbell is about to take a direct hit.
We've got tornado emergencies now going on, and you've done something that you've never done before.
Yeah, accordingly, for the first time in the history of the Tornado Condition Index, we've upped the value to a 10. If you're in northern Alabama, it's a 100% chance that you're going to see a tornado within 50 miles. And they may not be just ordinary tornadoes. These are destructive, potentially long-lived tornadoes.
Holy cow.
Can you see this little pinkish lavender oval or ball here? That's a tornado vortex signature right there to go along with it. I've seen so many of these in the past few days, it's frightening.
The tornado reaches Phil Campbell and causes significant widespread damage immediately as it's entering the city.
Phil Campbell 3 to 911. I got rotation coming through Phil Campbell right now.
Your name, well, I'm at Dawson. I'm sitting here looking at it. It's right above 337.
Set it right out. Let's get someplace safe.
804. Back here. 804.
You see the Phil Campbell area. We had reports of tornado going across Phil Campbell. You saw as it came into Phil Campbell, it still had that debris ball. Very strong debris ball there near the Hackleburg area. So very strong couplet at that point as well.
The tornado caused absolutely catastrophic damage in Phil Campbell. We will look at some of the damage photos later, but the tornado is absolutely massive, very violent.
Forecasters often refer to a hook echo as a definitive sign of a tornado. Well, this storm had something more, a well-defined debris signature, where the radar was not picking up rain or hail, but was actually picking up large chunks of debris like roofs, plywood, or even trees.
In Phil Campbell alone, this tornado would destroy 937 structures. 430 of those were homes. It's really awful to watch the news coverage as it's happening because you see, a velocity signature southwest of the town. It's approaching the town and you see it go over the town and then a debris signature very soon coming out of it. And you just know that these people's lives have been lost and forever changed, and it's a really gut-wrenching thing to sort of look at. The tornado moved out of Phil Campbell and would continue on its path through rural county for a little while before reaching other, even smaller rural communities.
Here it comes.
Storm did. Guys, take your tornado precautions with that cell. Here's our next one we're looking at. This one is in limestone.
The tornado is now approaching Lawrence County, still as a really strong tornado and capable of causing catastrophic damage. Again, the atmosphere is so volatile, nothing is really keeping this storm from continuing at the intensity that it is. The cell is still going as it crosses the northwest corner of Morgan County and moving finally into Limestone County.
And it's this back edge where we have this bright red ball. That is a debris ball now.
The tornado is now approaching a small community known as Tanner. The tornado at this point has re-intensified to over 200 miles an hour and is again almost a mile wide. You can see how massive it is as it moves into these areas.
The tornado at one point was very large. I mean, it was a mile wide, and so these people said they didn't even know what they were looking at. They just thought it was a low, big, dark cloud.
Meteorologists are still frantically trying to warn these people that a massive, violent tornado is approaching them.
We have no time to go back. We'll have to go north. All right, we're all right. We're all right. Okay, we gotta go.
There it is, the debris ball getting bigger. Here's the tornado. It looks like it's going to track just to the north of Decatur, Tanner. You got to seek shelter. This is as bad as it gets when we're tracking tornadoes. The tornado is on our alpha camera. We're getting power flashes in here as well. Wow. So we have a large wedge tornado on our alpha camera moving directly towards the camera. Look at the bottom of the screen. We've got power flashes going on within this storm. This is a massive tornado. This may be the last few images we see of this tornado. It's going right towards our camera and it's going right towards our... Let's go back full, please.
Yeah, please. Full.
Please go back full. Wow. There you go. That's the tornado. It is ripping through homes right there. As we take a look at the bottom of the base, this car is driving right into it.
Man, it's moving fast.
It is. This is barreling through. This is moving at 60 to 65 miles an hour.
At this point, the tornado is within 2 miles of the Browns Ferry nuclear power plant. Somehow, the tornado narrowly misses the nuclear power plant here as well. Thank God. Again, I don't know what kind of, what would happen if it did hit the nuclear power plant. I can't imagine it would be very good, but the tornado at the very least would cause power outages and damage to the surrounding area, which would cause the power plant to have to shut down.
This is a significant tornado. We could be dealing with EF3 to EF5 type tornado.
As the tornado moves through Tanner, this is another place where really catastrophic damage would occur. Again, we'll look at some of the pictures when we talk about surveys, but well-built anchored homes would be leveled here. So this would be another example of the really intense, violent damage to come out of this tornado.
Oh my gosh.
That's it.
That is it.
I've never seen one like that.
Oh my gosh.
I've seen a little twister before, but I've never seen anything like that.
This is like off the movie Twister. Have you ever seen that movie?
Oh shit. That's it.
Look over here. Look at the clouds going like in a circle. And like right there. Oh my word.
There it is.
That is it.
I think we're fixing to go somewhere. I don't know where the hell we're going.
Look at that! Look at that! It's getting stuff.
Yeah.
It's getting stuff.
Open the door. It's fixing to hit right on top of us.
Look at the breeze. That's somebody pushing.
Okay.
Look at this.
That's the tornado. We're on it. It's on it right there. Oh my God! Who's that S5?
It's right there.
Man, I hope he is okay.
Oh my God. Oh my God. It's right there. The tornado is right there.
Get in.
Getting in closer. You see our radar no longer turning out there. We've taken a direct hit.
The storm then approaches and crosses Highway 72 in eastern Limestone County. And again, unfortunately moving into a more heavily populated suburban area, most notably a neighborhood called Anderson Hills and Carter's Gin subdivisions would sustain direct hits. Thankfully, these weren't at EF5 or 4 intensity. These were at EF3 intensity. Only a small portion of this area would get an EF4 rating, but a majority of the area at this point would get an EF3 rating. Finally, as the tornado has left the Tanner Harvest area, it slowly begins to weaken out a little bit as it's approaching the Tennessee border. It reaches just south of Huntland, Tennessee, where it would cause EF0 and EF1 damage. Just after crossing through Huntland, the monstrous tornado finally weakens enough to dissipate, and the nightmare Phil Campbell Hackleburg tornado is over.
Damage reports were slow to roll in from a few locations, and we knew why. It wasn't because this wasn't a damaging tornado, but because there was no one left to report the damage. In our gut, we knew that there were mass injuries and very likely a large number of fatalities.
We're just talking about the fact that this is really an extraordinary event. I mean, this may end up being one of the worst tornado outbreaks on record.
So we may wind up with something rivaling the super outbreak in 1974. We may get enough tornadoes also today to push April 2011 to the biggest tornado month on record. We'll see, but it's looking, unfortunately, that way.
Damage reports and calls for help are slowly coming out of Hackleburg, from Phil Campbell, from Tanner, Harvest, and these other smaller impacted communities. Those impacted by the tornadoes are trying to come out of the rubble. They're trying to locate their family members and really get an idea of what just happened to them because it was so catastrophic.
We're seeing the destruction. Can you kind of quantify it at all, or like at this point?
Up until this point, what we've done, we've got everybody set up to go out and to search the areas and try to clear the roads as much as they can so we can get to the residents. And then we'll know if there's anybody missing. We'll be searching specifically in the areas that they'd be missing. We've actually got doctors and nurses that have come in from hospitals. We've got a triage system set up in here. Russell Hospital is about to full capacity now because of our injuries plus some out in the county. So we're having to send them other places now. So this is one of the most devastating things that this area has ever faced. Our next steps right now until dark is to continue to search as much as we can. If we know that someone's missing even through dark, we'll be searching.
The hardest hit areas were Phil Campbell and Hackleburg and some of the areas in Tanner. They were essentially total losses, and they were also the places where the most injuries and fatalities occurred. I'm going to show you a lot of different pictures and videos, but please keep in mind that while I'm showing you a lot of footage, it doesn't come close to the amount of damage caused by this tornado.
Do you have any idea of where it first set down at? Yeah.
Just somewhere south of town here. We're not real sure.
Of course, you know, we know it was on the ground in Hackleburg. It's probably that same tornado.
Probably was the same tornado. And after it left here, East Franklin community was hit real heavy. Got some, I think, some fatalities out there and several injuries in that area. There's been a lot of people treated. I'd say between 75 and 100 people at least been treated at the triage center up here.
They just stripped it clean through here, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
Jack Ivy, once again, we're in Phil Campbell, Alabama, and we're talking with Mr. Terrell Potter and looking at some of the devastation. This is where the clinic and what else was that over here?
The clinic and the drugstore is right there.
Okay. As you can see, it's pretty much totally destroyed.
The scenes of destruction out there are sobering, even for a seasoned meteorologist and someone who has been on nearly 50 storm surveys. Seeing a house with an anchor bolting completely obliterated in Oak Grove was sobering. Seeing entire neighborhoods in northwest Madison County brought to the ground was horrendous. The scene along Rosie Road in Tanner was gut-wrenching, and just walking down Brown Street in Phil Campbell too much to bear. The storm was so powerful there that it pulled the pavement out of the ground. Just think about the force involved there for a minute. But that's a mere sampling of the catastrophic destruction that stretches as far as the eye can see.
For some of these areas where you see slabbed homes, it makes you really wonder how some of these people survived. And that's not even considering some of these people that had to see loved ones die. Or I can't imagine trying to, seeing that someone you love or that you're with, you've been in this tornado with, that needs help. And unfortunately, a lot of times people are trapped or can't get the help that they need in time. And this is the case for a lot of tornadoes. It's no different for the Phil Campbell Hackleburg tornado. It's really heavy stuff. And again, I think when we're talking about damage happening to these smaller communities, we have to consider that when a tornado goes through a rural town, it's taking away the entire livelihood of the town, because destroying things like the factory where people work at, the courthouse buildings, churches, schools, things like that. Oftentimes these are the only churches or the only schools or, the only local business that provides a certain service. This is what we have to think about when we talk about tornadoes in rural communities. And part of the reason why the Hackleburg, Phil Campbell, Tanner Harvest tornado was especially devastating is because it took away a lot of the integral parts of these smaller towns.
But the stories of survival are also uplifting. I think of the many people who praised the warning system for saving their lives, and the many that showed us their storm shelters and where they went to ride out the storm. We found a family of 4 in Higdon who somehow were left untouched in their house when everything else was swept clean around them. There wasn't even any rubble left, and the propane tank was lofted directly over their heads, just missing them by a few feet.
All right, I thought we should talk about the surveys a little bit after talking about damage, because I think that talking about the surveys gives us a better insight as to how the tornadoes are rated, what the NWS kind of does after the storms, things like that. So the tornado was rated EF5, of course. This was the highest possible rating you can get because the damage was simply unbelievable. Just by wind speed alone, of course, the Hackleburg Phil Campbell is an EF5 because they're over 200 miles an hour. So they're already incredibly intense. But another thing that the National Weather Service looks for is for homes to be completely destroyed that are well-built homes. And by that, they want it to be an anchored down home. This tornado definitely swept clean a lot of anchored homes. And you can see those pictures of where they're showing bolts or some sort of foundational anchoring, and the homes were swept clean. So that, by all means, is EF5 intensity damage. So not only were most of the damage indicators, the DIs that are needed to get F5 ratings ticked off, they were really kind of maximized. The degrees of damage were maximized. Other major damages that made it an obvious EF5 included the fact that cars were thrown great lengths. Well-built brick homes being leveled is another, pretty obvious indicator of EF5 intensity, and trees being uprooted or snapped and carried, tens of yards away. That's another pretty good indicator. The total damage path length was 132 miles, which is astounding, and its widest point would reach 2,200 yards. This would be the theme for the entire day of April 27th, 2011. There were, again, 15 violent tornadoes, and hats off to the National Weather Service and the surveying team, because this was a very traumatic event to have to work. going through these communities and seeing a freshly devastated town and having to survey homes where people have not only died but just lost everything. It's an extremely heavy emotional toll to have to carry, to go through for weeks in this case.
In the days that followed the destruction, our staff worked many 16-plus hour days, surveying damage, providing incident support to first responders, and just being there for the community.
The tornado as a whole would take 71 lives. Some of the reports will say 72, but I read a lot and one person was actually counted twice. So the official actual death toll is 71 just from this one tornado. And this would make it the single deadliest tornado in Alabama history. And it was actually the longest tracked tornado on the day. In Hackleburg, there were a total of 18 fatalities and over 100 injuries, which again is a lot for a smaller town. Phil Campbell had 27 people lose their lives. Again, that's a lot for a smaller community. And out of the 62 tornadoes in Alabama on this day, 253 people in Alabama would lose their lives on this day. That is a staggering number for tornado fatalities in modern times. I will show you some of the pictures of the memorials for the people. Of course, they are really nice to look at and acknowledge. And of course, now they are really important parts of the communities of Phil Campbell, Hackleburg, Tanner, all these different places. They're really integral to the newly built town, is memorializing the lives that were lost. There are a lot of really awful, horrific stories I've read. I'm not going to share all of them just because I don't know, I think it's really morbid there, but if you want to go look for them, there are stories of a lot of people who lost their entire families in this one day. Again, maybe you personally know some of these people, but it's just really heavy, and the ones that I personally read were only from this one tornado, not from the entire outbreak. So to balance that out, there are also a lot of survival stories that I think are kind of refreshing to read as well. So the entire outbreak we've discussed a little bit. 253 people lost their lives. From April 25th to April 28th, over 360 tornadoes would touch down across the Deep South. And the damage, again, we've just looked at one tornado, but for the entire event, the amount of damage that was inflicted on these states, particularly Alabama, is just mind-boggling. It's hard for us to really fathom the scope of a kind of outbreak of this magnitude. And still, I have a hard time really fathoming some of the damage that occurred. Like the trees being debarked is always one that is just, imagine how much force it takes to do something like that. In Phil Campbell, asphalt was ripped up. So these are things that are really hard for us to fathom how strong the winds have to be for something like that to happen. And this happened with 15 different tornadoes on this day. And of those 15 violent tornadoes, 11 of those were EF4s and 5 of those were EF5s in a 24-hour period. Think about that. We haven't had an EF5 tornado since 2013. We had a really intense EF4 tornado in Mayfield that some would say is an EF5, but I digress. Even outside of those violent tornadoes, there were hundreds, literally hundreds of tornadoes that caused so much damage. And let me just give you a single example of one of the 360 tornadoes that touched down, a non-violent one, so one on the lower end of the scale. On April 25th, there was an EF2 tornado that went through Valonia, Arkansas, that ended up causing $53 million in damage from an EF2 tornado, and 4 fatalities. 2 of those fatalities occurred when a couple tried to shelter in a cargo container, which was later thrown 150 yards and into a pond. And that's an EF2. This is one of 360 tornadoes. The response for the cleanup in the Hackleburg, Phil Campbell communities was tremendous. An outpouring of support came into the communities. Many people came from out of state to help in any way that they could to rebuild these communities.
I gained a greater sense of pride in our community, with people helping strangers, stopping to hand out food, or just stopping to see if you need a ride to a shelter. Those are little pieces of joy and optimism in a large sea of despair. Our community will recover. We will move forward. And the National Weather Service will continue to work tirelessly to protect our citizenry when the next threat approaches.
Additionally, all the media coverage from Phil Campbell and Hackleburg gave them extra attention in the national media, which subsequently got them extra funding and a lot of extra assistance that they really needed. So this was a really good thing to have ample coverage in these more rural areas.
So today, what you see here is just an aftermath of faith.
The United States of America has the most volunteers in the world. We are the most volunteer-oriented country in the world. And Phil Campbell has seen that evidence in the last year.
They have given us a lot of support and love that we really needed, and food and material to help us move on.
Thank you.
The Mennonite ministries have been here. They've built several houses. The Habitat for Humanity houses are being built. We're very proud of. A lot of the faith-based initiatives have built houses here.
We wasn't able to work or provide anything. They just provided us a house and told us that it was give out of love, and all we can do is love back. And we thank the Lord every day for the people of Phil Campbell and how they've helped us to come together as a family, and the words just can't say how proud we are.
And again, just like we always talk about, the rebuilding process is such a long, painstaking thing to have to undergo. And for Phil Campbell specifically, just to clean it up would take a year and a half. So on top of that, we're talking an extra 2-3 years to get all of the main city structures rebuilt, the high school, the public pool that was destroyed, public housing, all these things took several years. Hackleburg was the same. It was a very long, painstaking process to tear down a lot of the really important buildings to them, their downtowns, their churches, things like that, and have to go through the process of rebuilding. And although it would take some time, both Hackleburg and Phil Campbell would rebuild back. We have to really commend these smaller towns that are hit by tornadoes because they show a lot of great faith and courage in rebuilding their entire town, which is such a massive undertaking.
Well, today is April the 27th, 2012. 1 year and 1 hour past the tornado, the EF5 tornado that swept through Phil Campbell 1 year ago, and the loss of 27 lives here in Phil Campbell.
The people here and the people that came to help us are the reason that Phil Campbell's where it's at now, and the reason that its future looks so well. Bruce Foreman had a vision for that park, and that park is going to be a hub for this community. It's going to be a place to remember the people that we lost and to look forward to the future, because you'll have your kids playing there, and the town's, it's going to be going somewhere, it really is.
And I don't see us going back, I just see us getting stronger and stronger.
We had a lot of loss of life in this community last year on April the 27th. My neighbor, little Ethan, he always stopped and said, "How are you, Miss Judy?"
I sure miss him riding up and down the street on his bike, always waving, sweet, sweet boy. Oh, we miss him.
And we're going to let these little kids release these balloons in honor of all these lovely lives that we love and cherish.
If you could say one thing to little Ethan today, what would you let him know?
That I'm doing good, and that I know you're proud of me because I'm being strong. And you never liked me cry, so I'm not going to cry. And I love you and I miss you.
It's been just over 10 years now. The 10-year anniversary just passed last year in April. There are a lot of really nice specials that were done on the event. I'm happy to say that Phil Campbell has actually not only rebuilt since then, but most of the original population actually moved back into Phil Campbell because of the amount of rebuilding they did. They blew it out of the water. They did an excellent job. So I think that's really neat. Phil Campbell is doing really well today. Hackleburg is pretty close to that. I don't think that they've reached quite the same population that they initially had. Hackleburg is still doing really well, all things considered.
Thank you very much. 5 years ago today, 75% of the Marion County town of Hackleburg was wiped out. Today, the rebuilding effort there continues to be a work in progress.
Governor Bentley spent a good chunk of his morning right here in Hackleburg. He had a chance to visit a new city hall, a new police station, and even a new high school. He also signed an executive order which outlines a new task force and its mission.
We have 4,200, 4,300 safe rooms that have been approved with the mitigation dollars that we got after these tornadoes. And 3,000 of those have been built, and I can tell you that will save more lives than anything else that we can do in this state.
One of the biggest changes that came out of this event was the need to incorporate social science into meteorology. And this is something that's talked about a lot. I'm personally a big fan of the Weather Brains podcast, but they consistently have discussions about the need for social science improvements in the meteorology community, and that consists of helping with the warning process and understanding the human sociology of why people shelter, don't shelter, what makes them go to shelter. One of the biggest changes that has to happen is figuring out a way in which we can get rid of some of these excessive tornado warnings that cause people to not believe tornado warnings when they're actually confirmed tornadoes on the ground headed your way. And I think that's really just going to come down to having better technology, more data sampling in the future, hopefully in our lifetime. Actually, I think that'll happen in our lifetimes, but I'm excited for that to happen because I think it'll be a really huge step forward in making sure that people are safe during these kinds of events. And I don't know, I just think it's really important to talk about. So April 27th, 2011 was such an anomalous event. It truly was a tornado outbreak beyond what anyone could have imagined it would be, and will forever be remembered as an exceptionally dark day for the South and an event that forever changed Alabama history. If you guys have anything interesting to add that I wasn't able to add in this video, or anything you want to share, as always, leave it down in the comments. This again is a really fresh event that all of us likely remember where we were on the day, hearing the news, things like that. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have really good stories. As always, I'm going to be linking the FEMA and ready.gov resources for tornado safety and shelters. So guys, again, if you don't have a tornado safety plan, think about it in your brain. Know where you're gonna go. Just make sure you have a plan ready. You don't have to have a underground shelter. You can have a closet or a place to go, or just think about what you would do during an event. Those links will be in the description. We are rapidly approaching spring, which means here in the South we will be looking at tornadoes very soon. So make sure that you are prepared. I'm gonna get out of here before my throat completely dries out and gets crusty, but thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.